Recording in progress. I didn't even do that. I don't know who did that, but
I did.
thank you very much.
Now I'm leaving.
Okay, very good. Okay, first of all, thank you so much. Hold on, let me close that up. Thank you so much for joining me. And for those people who have not been here before, then welcome. And for those people who have been here before, then welcome, welcome once again. And we've been talking about the subject of tshuva, or return. And last week I began with a little physical exercise. I don't have anything so clever this week, but I hope everybody remembered to cross their arms and recross their arms over the course of the week. We spoke, and I spoke last week also about self-examination and about spending some time doing that, and I hope that people continue to do that. Again, I encourage you, maybe 5 minutes at night before bed, just spend a little bit of time kind of looking over your day. As I mentioned last week, 2 different kinds of self-examination, a kind of an inventory to kind of get an idea of where you are, and then a kind of a little bit closer inspection of take one thing, something positive, something not so positive, and kind of look it over for its opposite. So if something not so positive, look for the positive motivations in it, and something which is not so positive, something which is positive, maybe look for the negative motivations in it. So tonight I wanted to share, I wanted to go a little bit deeper into some of our sources, and excuse me 1 second.
You're mean.
And particularly tonight we're going to continue, I think probably with next week we'll be talking about the Rambam, and I'll be adding to our sources. But tonight we'll be talking a little bit about Rebbe Nachman of Breslov and some of his kind of general spiritual advice when it comes to tshuva. So one of my very favorites is in source 18. And it's a very deep, I think a very deep concept. So Rabbi Nachman says, when a person wants to return to God, he must become an expert in the halacha. And here it's very interesting because he's engaged in a little bit of a pun, right? So he says the person has to be Bucky bahalacha. A person has to be knowledgeable or an expert in the law. But then he goes to explain that he's not talking about halacha in terms of the law, but he's talking about halacha in terms of going. The word halacha really means to the going, or the path, or the way to go. And so he explains it like this. He says 2 kinds of skill are needed in the running and the returning. So in the prophet Ezekiel, it describes the movement of the angels, and it says that they are ratza v'shov, that they're ratza v'shov, that they rush forward and they move backwards. They move forward and return, move forward and return. And so he then explains. He says these 2 expressions correspond to the rising and falling which King David speaks of in his Psalms. If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, if I make hell my bed, behold, you are there. So Rebbe Nachman points out, and I think sometimes that this is, one of the most important messages that we can have about tshuva, is to understand that life is full of ups and downs. Very often we expect we have the expectation that not only are the reality around us, but the reality inside of us is going to be consistent. It's going to be predictable. It's going to be pleasant. It's going to be it's going to be comprehensible. And we all know, those of us who have lived a few years, that that's not true. That in fact, we're subject to incredible ups and downs, both in what goes on around us, and in our inner weather, and what goes on inside of us. And so Rebbe Nachman says we have to be skilled. And he says, when a person wants to return to God in the process of tshuva, the process of coming closer to God, and really tshuva is just a kind of an intensive approach to coming closer to God, that requires us to be able to deal with both of those situations. We have to be able to deal with the ups, and we also have to be able to deal with the downs. And he goes further to explain. He says, this means that a person, and he relates this, by the way, to a beautiful verse from Tehillim, right? Imasek Shemayim Shamata. If I busy myself in Shemayim, in heaven, there I find you, right? V'yatzia Sha'ol. This is Hinecha. Is it where? And if I go down to hell, there you are too. Meaning to say that if I go up, and if everything is great, yeah, there you are, God. And if I go down and I find myself in the depths, I can find you there too. So this means that a person who wants to return to God must gird his loins and keep firmly to the pathway of God, regardless of whether he makes progress. If I ascend to heaven, or suffers reverses. So whether or not you're making progress, whether or not things seem to be working out for you, whether it's in your circumstances or in what you see as your own spiritual progress, you have to hold firm. You have to hold firm to it. You have to hold on. It says, if he makes progress and reaches a particular level of spirituality, be it high or not so high, he should not stop here and content himself with his achievements so far. Meaning to say that we should constantly be striving for more. If you find yourself, and you're saying to yourself, oh, I'm where I want to be, I don't want to do more. I don't want to be more. I don't want to be more connected to God. I don't want to have more faith. So that's problematic, because this is supposed to be a process of constant growth. We're supposed to be in constant growth. And so we shouldn't be stopping where we are. And I'm going to qualify that in a minute, because this concept of ratzo v'shuv, of going forward and stepping back, defies that a little bit, and I'll talk about that in a moment. He says we have to also be able to learn to hold our ground. But he says, first of all, this is the skill of running. Okay, the skill of ratzo, right? The skill of running. This is of these two movements that the angels make that we're imitating. One of them is to move forward, and we have to know, and we have to strive to move forward. We have to know when is our moment to try to grab more spirituality. When is our moment to do more? When is our moment when we can push forward? On the other hand, even if he falls into a lower level, even if he falls or she falls into the lowest pit of hell, God forbid, he must not despair in any way, regardless of his condition. Right? The only failure in spirituality is to give up. The only failure is to give up. If we're not giving up, if we're moving forward, we're holding fast, even if we're falling backwards, at least we're still in the game. Right? The only time that we can really fail is when we quit. right? Otherwise, okay, there's ups and there's downs, there's twists, there's turns, we're moving forward, you know. Um, we can stand there on Rosh Hashanah, we can stand there in Yom Kippur, and we can say, we're still here, we're still here, we're still in the game, we're still working at it. But if we quit, then the game is over. So he said he should remain firm, searching for God, pleading with him, begging him to help in whatever way he can. So let me explain a little bit more about this Ratzah v'Shuv kind of outside the text. So there are times when we need to advance further, right? When we know, we can feel a prompting inside that we want to do more, that we want to be more, that we want to be closer, that we want to make ourselves, to expand our experience of God. And there are also times when that's just not going to happen, right? There's times when it's just not going to happen. When the best we can do because of our circumstances is to just kind of hold our ground. And sometimes we actually have to take a step back, and not knowing, he uses the word Bucky, which means to be skilled. Not being skilled in this can be very dangerous. Good example. I think of this example every year. So imagine all those people who crowd into the synagogue at Ne'ilah. Okay, they crowd into the synagogue at Ne'ilah. And it's at the end of Yom Kippur. Many of them have not been there the entire year, right? They've had no preparation. They've had they haven't prepared themselves in any way. And they walk in, and for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, a half an hour, 45 minutes, they feel like an angel, right? They feel that feeling that, and they're singing the songs and it's coming to them and they feel this rush, right? And the Heichal is open and they can feel this, and they have this rush. They have this ratzah, this rushing forward, but they're not in any way prepared for it. They're not Bucky, they're not skilled in it. They don't know anything about it. All they know is that they have this feeling. And then what happens is they get a push, equal but opposite, right? There's a kind of an equal but opposite push that can often happen when you move forward too fast, that pushes them all the way back and keeps them out of synagogue for the rest of the year. I really believe that it's too much, too soon, too fast. It's all ratzah and there's no shuv. There's no opportunity, there's no way for them to be able to incorporate the experience that they've had. There's a beautiful teaching of the of Lubavitcher Rebbe, who said, points out that the Gemara says that a maidservant, a shifcha, who was standing by the sea, had an experience of godliness that was greater than all of the prophets. Right? She was standing by the sea, the splitting of the sea, and at that moment, the common shifcha, just a common maidservant, right, had this incredible revelation of godliness. So he says, you notice, it says that she was a shifcha, she was a maidservant. So what's the point? Why doesn't it say she was a neviah? Why didn't it say that she is herself a prophetess if she had this great experience? It said because she had the great experience. She had the ratzah, she had the rushing forward, but she didn't have the ability to shuv. She didn't have the ability to incorporate and to hold on to that experience. She didn't have what she needed to do that. And so it just spilled out. She wasn't able to hold on to it in any way. And so that's why that skill is so important. And that, by the way, it answers the question. So how is it possible that people who had this experience of all these miracles and so on could build, a golden calf and dance around it? Well, because they had not actually they'd actually taken in those experiences. Those experiences all come from above, and they hadn't managed to make it part of themselves. So that's that skill of shuv, that skill of stepping back, holding your ground, incorporating what it is you learned, right? In the same way, for example, if you're a teacher, and I think most teachers know this, you have to allow students time to let information and ideas, especially ideas more than information, sink in, right? You teach, and then you create activities that allow students to be able to use that material so that it will become part of them, so they're able to incorporate it into themselves. So Rabbi Nachman says we have to have both of these things. One of the problems with this time of year is that some of us, we get really into shuv, right? We're gonna, okay, that's it. We're in the big press, the full court press. We're gonna just you're just gonna get bang at it, and we're gonna try to improve ourselves. Well, the problem is that we're gonna get a big pushback. We don't know how to deal with, we might not know how to deal with that push. We might not expect the push if you know it's coming. That helps a lot. We don't have both of those things. Or alternatively, right, we move forward, and by nature, by the very fact of the reality of being a human being, right, we fall. We try to advance ourselves. We create. I had a friend with this experience. He created a beautiful Shabbat for himself. It was beautiful. Like everything, the atmosphere in the house was incredible and perfect, and it was amazing. And he had a neighbor who played really loud music, right? And every single week they would have a party on Friday night, and it would completely ruin his Shabbat. It was horrible. He would get so miserable and depressed, and because he would experience a real fall. Like he couldn't handle it, and not only couldn't he handle it, but he couldn't handle himself not handling it. Right? He didn't know how to deal with the fact that it was bugging him, right? Instead of being able to say, oh, okay, this is really bothering me, this is really difficult, and this is messing up my Shabbat, right? He just kind of plowed through and refused to kind of address the fact that he was having a difficult time. And that did not help him at all. So as Rabbi Nachman says here, he says that we need sometimes, if we find ourselves in these low places, okay, that's when we need to kind of hold on. Sometimes we just need to kind of take a rest, let things settle in, move on. This, of course, if anybody knows anybody who's done tshuva, I always hesitant to kind of use those words because, first of all, I don't think that anybody ever does tshuva. I think tshuva is a constant process. If you think you're done doing tshuva, then you have a problem. I think that's a more dangerous problem, honestly, if you think you've done tshuva. But for those who have done tshuva in the sense of becoming religious when they were not religious before, one of the things that often happens is burnout, right? People burn out because they're all ratzon and nobody ever tells them about shuv, right? They're all moving forward and nobody ever says, okay, sometimes you have to rest, you have to incorporate, take time, move slowly. And the advice to somebody who is becoming more observant should always be to take it slowly, right? Not to take on too much, too fast, and also not to take on a lot of things that you don't understand so fast. It's good to take time to understand what you're doing, to incorporate it slowly so that you're not going to be suffering from burnout. And continues. This is on the end of source 18. He said, one has to aim constantly for a higher level, while at the same time never allowing oneself to fall in any way or become despondent or discouraged. You know, there's a story about Rebbe Nachman himself, that he went to Israel and he was in the city of Tiberia, and there was a terrible plague, and I guess it's very appropriate now, given our last couple of years of worldwide pandemic, but there was this plague, and I think it was the Turks. In any case, they were clearing the city, and he had to escape the city of Tiberia, and he kind of leapt. There was a kind of a breach in a wall that kind of overlooked the that of the Kinneret, of the Sea of Galilee, and he jumps down and doesn't quite realize, how far it is, and he gets terrified, and suddenly he grabs this tree that's growing out of the wall, and he holds on to the tree. And he said at that moment, he understood the value of holding your place. He's like, he was holding his place, and he says he wasn't going up and he wasn't going down, but like the best thing he could do at that moment was just to be where he was, right? And he said at that moment, that's where he learned the value of just holding your place, right? He could see, the fall was too fast and he wasn't going up. So if the fall is too fast and you're not going up, then just hold your place. Try to just like that. He says, never allow yourself to fall in any way or become despondent, discouraged. Someone who acquires these skills will be able to walk the paths of true repentance, and God's right hand will be open wide and receive his repentance. He will attain to the glory of God, and man will be placed upon the throne, happy as he. Right. So this is his advice: is develop these two skills. It is interesting, by the way, when it said that a person should be Bucky b'halacha, the person should be skilled in halacha. Rabbi Nachman actually does talk about that, actually in the context of really studying halacha in many places. He only actually recommends two practices on a daily basis that everybody should do, and one of them is to do hidbodedut, to spend time talking to God, at least sometime every day. He recommends an hour. That's very difficult for most of us, but at least sometime every day, just talking to God in your own language, as a person speaks to a true friend. And the other is to learn a little bit of halacha every day, plain halacha, without any commentaries or any without anything. And at Magen David, we're learning a little bit of Ben Ish Chai every day. We also do a couple of halachot during the service. And he says the reason for doing that is that learning halacha in a very clear black and white way is helpful for clearing up the blurriness and grayness of the world. Right, the world is a very gray and blurry place where right and wrong, true and false are very often mixed up. And so by studying halacha in that way, one can create some clarity in this world. One of the another important point, and here we're in number 21, in source number 21. This is from a book, Likutei Eitzot, translated into English, I think, as advice. I think that's the translation. It's the collection of advice, which are collected pieces from his magnum opus, which is the Likutei Moharan. And one of the things that he recommends is when we think about our negativity, to think about it as something which is really remote from us. So here's what he says. He says, even no, that's not the one I want. Hold on. It's not the one I want yet. 28. Sorry, 28. He says, you must understand that the Jew is completely remote from sin. He has no connection with sin at all. So exalted is the subtle spirituality of his inner essence. This is why sin is such a heavy burden for the Jew. It's impossible to bear it for even a single day. For those of us who are doing slichot, there's a beautiful song, a piyut that we sing at the very end, and the very last line of that song, which Harry tells me it was added later, deals with this issue in a very, very beautiful way. There's a very poetic way. Says, this is why sin is such a heavy burden for the Jew. It's impossible to bear it for even a single day. It's worse than any other suffering in the world. A person must take pity on himself and try to repent of his sins and pray to God to help him find a leader who will show him true love, enlighten him with wisdom, and draw from his sins. There's no love greater than this. So the last part is a little bit more, related to the Hasidic idea of the tzaddik. I won't go into all of that, but the idea that we should think of our sin and think of our negativity as something which is not natural to us. We are naturally spiritual beings. We are naturally holy beings, and if we have a negativity, that negativity is really something which is alien to us. And if we pay attention, and this is, I think, this is a little bit of a challenge, and for those who spend a little bit of time in Hidbodedut, if you want to spend a little bit of time in meditation, a little bit of time talking to God, a little bit of time talking to yourself. A lot of times when you're talking to God, you're talking to yourself. Sometimes you're silent, sometimes you're singing, sometimes you're bored, sometimes there are lots of things that one does when one is alone with God. But when you're alone with God, really try to feel the burden that you bring. When you come, especially now that we're in Elul and we're now in the thick of Elul, and we're coming towards Rosh Hashanah and to Yom Kippur, to really be aware of what you're carrying around and the weight that it has on you. And then in Yiddish they refer to it as your pekala, your pekel, your baggage, right? And we all show up to God with this baggage of stuff, some of which we feel guilty about. And I talked last week about the difference between I'm seeing Dasi left us, sorry. The difference between guilt and shame, that shame is an existential experience. Guilt is a feeling about what we've done, and shame is about who we are, right? So here, what Rabbi Nachman is saying is that there's no possibility of shame because it's never who we are. We're never the worst thing we ever did. I had an aunt who had a neighbor he was an accountant. Not an accountant. Yeah. No, he was an IRS agent, and he had gone to jail for being bribed, right? And whenever my aunt referred to this IRS agent, she always referred to him as the guy who went to jail. Right? He had a name, he had a wife, he had kids, he had a life, right? He probably lived till he was 80 years old, and he spent 2 years in jail. And those 2 years defined for her who he was. He was the worst thing he had ever did, right? No person should ever be defined by the worst thing that they ever did, right? Least of all you, right? Least of all me, right? We should not be defined by the worst thing we ever did. So Rabbi Nachman is saying here, says, look, this is all very remote from you. This is, and if you pay attention to it, you feel the pain of carrying that around, right? So one of the things that we're doing in this period, as we're coming to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, is we're putting down our luggage, right? Imagine yourself on Rosh Hashanah, right? Showing up, like I do in the Ukraine, with your bags, and dumping it down. Okay, you're walking into the synagogue and you're dumping your bags down. You're saying, okay, I can't deal with this. This is not who I am, but look what I'm carrying around. Do you see this? Do you see this stuff? Right? Dirty laundry. I've been carrying around this dirty laundry for all these years. Throw your dirty laundry down and say, listen, I can't deal with it. I don't have what it takes. I don't have what it takes to deal with it. But this is not me. This dirty laundry, this is not who I am. That's not who I am. And by the way, you think to yourself, and again, when I was a child, I used to be very honest, I used to be absolutely appalled at the hypocrisy of the Yamim Noraim, at the hypocrisy of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. All these people I never saw before, right? All these people I never saw suddenly are coming in, right? And they're dressed in white, they're dressed in white as if they are so pure, right? As if they're so, super, super pure. And there are people who drive on Shabbat all year long, but they don't drive on one day a year, and that's Yom Kippur. And they're fasting on Yom Kippur, but they've been eating bacon the rest of the year. Right? Just hypocrisies of every possible kind, right? Every possible kind, and including my own hypocrisy. If I'm standing there, dressed up like an angel, wearing my white, I wear a white kaftan, right? So I look like a big angel. I'm not a big angel. I'm just a guy, right? And I'm just a big guy dressed up like an angel, right? And it's all okay. It's all lies, right? That's one way of looking at it. Or the other way of looking at it is finally revealing the truth. Finally revealing for one moment, accepting the truth, right? That really I am a holy being, really that I am a spiritual being, really that I have this incorruptible inner essence. And no matter what I did the rest of the year, no matter what I did that morning, right? Whatever I did, I'm celebrating that thing. I'm celebrating that thing. So at a more advanced level, right? This is a more advanced level. We also, that was, by the way, as an individual, right? So I'm saying as an individual, I have to look and I'm saying, okay, that big bag of dirty laundry that I'm bringing with me, that's not me, right? I disown that. It's not me. I've been carrying it around. I'm putting it down. Bonus Shalom, please take it from me. And then there's the collective, because we're standing there not just as individuals, really, but we're standing there as a collective. And if you think about our tefillot, right? Our prayers are always in the plural. We ashamnu bagadnu, right? I'm confessing not only for myself, I'm confessing for you. I'm confessing, we're confessing for each other, right? We're confessing for the collective. And Rabbi Nachman says elsewhere that not only is sin remote from us as individuals, but it's remote from us as a community. It's remote from us as a community. We are a holy entity. We are Knesset Yisrael. We're a holy entity. We are made to be a vessel for kedusha. We're made to be a vessel for holiness. That's what we're here for, right? And anything that is not that, right, is painful. And the Zohar Kadosh, the Zohar has a beautiful description of this, where the Shekhinah is complaining, "Oy my head, oy my arm," right? Meaning to say that we cause pain to the Shekhinah, right? The presence of God is in pain because of our collective sin. And so in many places, Rabbi Nachman says, not only should have pity on yourself, but you should have pity on God. You should have pity on God. That you should, right? That part of your motivation is say, Ribono Shel Olam, I'm causing you pain. You know, you wherever you go with me, where I go, right? If Hashem is giving me my life force, and I'm taking that life force and I'm using it for something negative, then in essence, what I'm doing is I'm taking Hashem with me down into the sin. He's coming with me. That's what it says, by the way. If I go down to hell, you're there, right? Because he's coming with me no matter where I go. So that means, what have I done? I've now brought him into my depths. I've now brought him into my lower places, right? And the least I can do is, the least I can say is, Shalom, what have I done to you? You know, I brought you, and this is completely remote from you, completely far away from, and look where I brought you. So to have pity, to have mercy on yourself, and is also to have mercy even on the Rebbe Shalom, and to have mercy on the Creator of the world, that we bring him into these places. You know, but none of this is easy. One of the sources here, I have to find it, tells us that none of this is fast. You know, sometimes we find ourselves in a very big rush, and they, meaning the spiritual forces, say, wait, not yet. You know, we have our timing. You know, we look at the calendar, we go, it's Elul. Rosh Hashanah is coming up. Yom Kippur is coming up. Right? It's time for me to get it together. I got, this is, I'm coming into the home stretch. This is, we're in the final innings, or whatever they call them in cricket. I don't know. They must call them something for Harry. I'm coming into the, I'm coming into the home stretch, and I got to do it. And so it doesn't always work that way. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes we have to wait. Sometimes the waiting is also part of the process. Sometimes it's not yet. So if you find yourself, right, and like you're trying to move forward, you're trying to say, okay, he told me to examine myself 5 minutes every day, right? And I can't even do it for 2 minutes. I can't even think about doing it. Don't give up, don't worry. That's just them telling you to wait. Now, the question is, why did they tell you to wait? There's a beautiful Gemara about this waiting. He says when you go into a store that sells um, various kind of perfumes and elixirs and things like that. He says, you know, when you go to buy kerosene, right? The guy just leaves you at the door and he says, yeah, take whatever you want, right? And he lets you take the kerosene because he doesn't like the smell. He says, but when you go to buy atar, when you go to buy beautiful perfume, right? The guy who owns the store, what does he do? He says, wait a minute. And he goes and he opens it up. And the both of you sit there and you smell the smell a little bit. And he takes his time. He says, wait. And because he's enjoying the smell with you. He says, this is what tshuva is. The struggle is a reach nechoch LaHashem. The struggle itself is a beautiful fragrance for Hashem, right? The very fact that you commit yourself to work on yourself, the fact that you showed up tonight on whatever today, what is today? I forgot, Memorial Day, Labor Day, whatever it is, whatever today is, on a Monday when everybody had day off, you showed up and you invested in yourself, invested in your own tshuva, invested in preparing for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. That in itself is already a beautiful smell to Hashem, and he gets incredible nachat ruach, incredible pleasure from that already. So I'm up to 43 minutes. I never go before more than 45 because that's all that human beings can actually pay attention statistically. So questions, thoughts?
I want to say that you're preparing us for the holidays in a wonderful words, and I thank you for that.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm very happy to do it, and I'm glad that I have this opportunity. It's so nice also for me to be able to give back something to the synagogue that I love so much.
Aaron's got a question for you.
Love
Yes.
you very much.
Avram, suppose someone has committed a great sin like murder. I mean, I understand that you say that there's no shame because the person's essence is essentially holy, right?
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
So, but the person still feels guilty. What can you address that? I mean, someone who commits a big sin.
Yeah, well, big sins or little sins, you still have to go through the same process, you know. I mean, in the sense that, you know, the person still has to do tshuva, but once the person has done tshuva, and once again, it's complicated. It's complicated because that tshuva, so to speak, you know, can be in a technical process, the completion of the tshuva, which is the atonement, what we call atonement, the kapara, can be held over until the person dies in the case of severe sins. Okay, we don't understand what that means. Honestly, we don't understand what that means. It's spiritual process that we don't understand. But in practical terms, a person does tshuva. They do whatever they can to make restitution, because obviously when you kill somebody, you've damaged their family. Do whatever restitution you can, and then you have to move on. And your obligation is to live as good a life as you possibly can from then on.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's and the obligation of people around you is to let you do that, which is not easy sometimes. Okay, more questions, thoughts?
I have just a comment. Your story about can you hear me?
Yes, who's speaking? I'm just
I'm sorry, it's Jan.
Jan,
Sadaka.
okay. Yeah.
Your story about the beautifully prepared Shabbat that was interrupted consistently
Yes.
by the loud noise.
Yeah.
We have a parallel, not quite that horrible, but does anybody remember when there was a barbecue that was always staged on Saturday morning and right next to us, you know, at Magen David? there was somebody, a guy who would come out in his shorts and sometimes no top, and he would fire up the barbecue. It made me think about how, everywhere there can be some interruption. We don't have him anymore. Maybe he moved, but it reminded me.
You can also see that as a good sign, in the sense that, I think it's Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi who says that, if you're praying and you have no interruptions, right? You're praying, you have no thoughts coming, nothing bothering you. He says that's a very bad sign, because that means that the Satan has given up on you. He's not worried about you, right? On the other hand, is if you start to pray and all of a sudden, thoughts come to you and you get confused, and says that's a very good sign, because it means that the Satan has decided that you're worth messing with. And I had a teacher in India who used to say the Satan never robs an empty house, right? Right? Never robs an empty house. So that means if somebody is raising a ruckus next to the synagogue, it means that there must be something very holy, wonderful going on in the synagogue that merits the disruption. So that's a good sign, very good sign. Okay, other thoughts? Okay, well, I'm very easy to find. If you have any thoughts during the week, please pass them on to me. You can always send them to Andrea, you can send them to me, or you can find me on Facebook, or you can find me on wherever.
Rabbi, I have one question. I was sorry I didn't come in sooner. I didn't hit the right keys. How do we keep ourselves from falling into a rut with repeating the chaparas a million times over again and again and again?
Yeah.
I mean, after a while, it gets ridiculous. How many times do you have to say this?
Oh, you're talking about the confessions?
Yes.
It's the confessions. Yeah, it's difficult. One of the things that I do, and this is is I try to fill them in, meaning to say, like, I like to say real things, like, see, part of it is like the obligation is actually to confess. And really what that is that's a reminder to confess, right? That's actually, those confessions are really a reminder, not the confession themselves, because we didn't do all those things, right? And so for those things where I know that I have particularly, where I have particular issues or things I've done, I kind of pause and think about things I've really done and speak about them. And so I think part of it is like making time to actually speak your own heart will also change things and make it a little bit fresher.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, that's
focus on what belongs to us, and don't worry about everything else.
right. I mean, I think I think it's important to really do it, and not to be afraid and not to worry about what everybody else is doing or what their pace is and whatever else, but just speak, spend time to speak out your own heart and say, listen, this is what I did, and with as much boldness and humility together as you can.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome. Thoughts? Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me.
Thank you.
For Ezrat Hashem, we'll be back next week, and we'll learn more together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
for
Thank
all the
you,
time.
Rebbe Avram.
Thank you so
Bye. Beautiful. Thank you.